Hello. So today we will be talking about the U.S. federal court system, and we will be examining how they're structured and how cases move through each level. So talking about federal courts. So first, district court. So the federal system begins with the U.S. district courts, and those are usually called trial courts. And district courts spread throughout the country with at least one in each state. And their primary role is to handle initial trials for civil and criminal federal cases. And at these courts, the evidence that is presented, there's evidence presented, there's witnesses that testify, and there's jurors that usually deliver verdicts. And next, there is appellate courts. So they're above district courts. We have the Court of Appeals. And these don't conduct new trials. Instead, they kind of review decisions from district courts to ensure that the laws were applied correctly in these cases. And this process is known as a appellate jurisdiction. So appeals are decided by panels of judges who carefully examine with written arguments called briefs, and they also listen to oral arguments presented by both parties. And next we have the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is the highest court we have in the country, the United States, and this court mostly hears cases on appeal, and often. They select them based on significant constitutional or federal questions. A case that usually reaches the Supreme Court is usually requested and reviewed through lower courts, and then they usually work their way up to the Supreme Court. And through about thousands of requests are usually filed each year, and only about 70 to 80 of them are actually heard. Next, we will be talking about how cases travel through the federal court system. So, for the district court, a case first appears at the district court, and it's tried before judges or juries, and usually that's where the evidence is introduced and a verdict is usually reached. And then the appeals court is basically the losing party to that side, whoever loses in the district court. They can go to the Court of Appeals and argue legal errors that happen in the trial. And and then next we have the Supreme Court. And for the losing party, can petition the Supreme Court for review if they didn't win their case. And the Supreme Court usually decides whether to accept a case or not. And if accepted, both parties will submit detailed briefs and present oral arguments. And ultimately, the Supreme Court issues its final opinion there. And that is how cases travel through the federal court system. So next we will be talking about landmark cases, like the Brown versus the Board of Education. That's the case we'll be going through. And so basically at the district court level, the Brown versus the Board of Education case began when African families challenged racial segregation in public schools. And initially at the district court, segregation was upheld based on the precedent of Plessy v. Ferguson, which happened in 1896, and that right there established the separate but equal doctrine. And then next we go into the Court of Appeals for the Brown v. Board of Education, and the Court of Appeals basically the families appealed to the appellate court, which also ruled against them, upholding segregation laws by following the established precedent. However, this created an opportunity for a higher appeal, and that leads to the Supreme Court, which the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case. And extensive briefs were prepared for the Supreme Court, and powerful arguments were presented in this case, and including famous arguments from Thurgood Marshall, who later became the first African American Supreme Court justice. And for the Brown v. Board of Education, that was a unanimous decision in 1954 by the Supreme Court, and they overturned the separate but equal doctrine, ruling that racial segregation in public schools and public education was unconstitutional. And in conclusion of all this, the federal courts system has multiple levels designed to carefully review and interpret laws, ensuring that justice is applied fairly to each and every case. And cases like Brown v. the Board of Education really do illustrate how impactful these courts can be in shaping society. So yeah, thank you.